Hi, I'm Jacob.
I'm Joe. Here we are. Episode, what is it now? 4. Episode 4.
Final episode.
Yeah, wow. Of the final episode of the Flat Earth, the debate stuff.
Yeah.
There'll be more to come. But, so, quick recap episode 3. Episode 3, so I'm, a recap of the whole project. I'm having this debate with these Flat Earthers in Discord. Previous episodes, we've disagreed about Einstein and stuff like that. That's how the conversation got restarted. And we got launched into this really long debate that I had with them about the nature of science and what scientific research, like what science really is and how it's distinguished from non-science. We go into a lot of depth in previous episodes about various bits of those debates. This episode, what we really kind of kick off by, we look some more at the kind of sources they send me as kind of, they're intended to be authoritative sources on the nature of the scientific method. We talk about the Human Genome Project, which is, again, something that they think is like not real science because it doesn't conform to their weirdly overly rigid conception of science.
Yeah, because it's not hypothesis driven.
It's not hypothesis driven, exactly.
That makes it pseudoscience and a fun creative project.
Yeah, even though the source they sent me was specifically making the point that science can be non-hypothesis driven.
And they at the same time disagree with you that the source agrees with you and disconfirms what they say.
Yeah. So
they think that the source is fine, but they also disagree with the source.
Yes.
Which is cool.
Yeah. It's awesome. It's so awesome. Like they clearly haven't read or if they have read, really, really not comprehended what they were reading at all. But yeah, so, and then I talk a little bit about, this is something that all philosophers, I think good philosophers should do, is we have a little moment where we think, what the fuck is the point of this? And I go on a little bit of a spiel about why I think it is important to distinguish science from non-science, and why it's important to address the misconceptions these people have about the distinction between science and non-science, because that distinction has political meaning. It has kind of epistemic meaning relating to what kinds of knowledge we take seriously in our society and in our everyday lives, right? So I think these questions are really important. As well as just intrinsically, philosophically interesting. They go on to say that they basically they insinuate at the very least that I'm an idiot for going on to have a science education. Then they also accuse me of thinking that the label science, the term science, is just like completely arbitrary, willy-nilly. Like one of them goes on about how their example was like when you're smoking a spliff, is that science? Like
I think he said bong.
Did he? You ripping a bong?
I think he did say.
Okay,
yeah.
You ripping a bong, is that science? And obviously I don't think that's science, but we talk about why it is that they basically...
Your response to that is so funny. You're like, no, I definitely don't say that.
What did I say that to them?
Yeah, like in the debate recording. Okay. He's like, is that science? You're like, no, I don't think that. You're like laughing.
Oh, right, because I'm creasing. Right, yeah. I can't remember it that well, actually. But look, anyway, so then and then in response to this, me and Jacob have a conversation, much more fruitful, interesting conversation about they accuse me of thinking the term science is arbitrary. In actual fact, what I've been saying to them the whole time is that the term science is vague. Now, vague terms are a very interesting philosophical topic. There's a lot to be said about what it means for something to be a vague term. I think science is a vague term. We talk about that, what that means and how it's distinguished from it being meaningless or whatever it is that they accuse me of.
The idea being that it's not arbitrary. It can still have like kind of clear, objective kind of truth conditions to its application.
Yeah, you can
whatever.
apply it correctly or wrongly, but there are there are going to be edge cases inevitably, right?
Exactly, there are going to be borderline cases, and there's not going to be a determinate answer.
Yeah, and then we end up
something is science or not.
Yeah, exactly, and then we end up talking about like specific cases, like engineering projects and things like that, about like where they kind of fall on this spectrum of science, non-science, right? Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, and then in this episode, so first of all, I just want to comment. I love how you just gave the recap of episode 3 in like future tense. So
did I really?
Yeah.
Oh shit! Like it's gonna come up.
Yeah.
Oh fuck!
You like at no point said we did talk about this. You always say and we go on to talk about this.
Oh right, okay.
Or and we will talk about this.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Okay.
It's fine.
That's happened in the past. All of them.
Yeah. That was last week's, or like 2 weeks ago, or however we released this. Yeah. Anyway, so now this episode, the one you're listening to right now, last episode of this debate, right? So if you're not sick of it by now, you will be in 2 hours, like however long the runtime of this one goes.
This is a long one.
So basically what ends up happening, and the really interesting thing about this being so long is that the debate actually is, we have about 4 or 5 minutes left of the actual debate audio left to go. but so much gets crammed into that last bit. So Joe kind of gets a pop quiz on his philosophy of science, right? So up till now, for those who have come in, I've just realized this, Joe, right? As we're after like hours and hours and hours of us recording this, those who have come into this podcast expecting to kind of learn more about flat Earth are going to be so disappointed because, like, surely we're going to be like saying this is your debate with some flat Earthers, but you never talk about the Earth being flat or being a globe. That actually never comes up. That's insane. But up till now, they've just been talking about science, and the philosophy of science has kind of been led to the side. And the position that they've been holding has been super implausible. I think even just by most people's standards, you don't even have to be like kind of educated in philosophy of science. Hopefully, to not think that science isn't just demarcated by following some step-by-step method or something.
We do say though, like it does come up in science education. It's an unfortunate fact about science education, but I don't think that people, if they haven't been told that by someone, I don't think they would naturally think it. You know what I mean? So yeah, but anyway, go on.
Yeah, well, in this episode, basically, a guy comes in and he asks Joe, well, what about Popper, right? What about this guy, Karl Popper? And what about falsification? Joe kind of talks a little bit about falsification with them. And then he gets hit with a series of questions, right? So question number 1, what comes first, a theory or a hypothesis? What comes first, induction or deduction? Inductive reasoning or deductive reasoning? And then what describes models or theories? We then spend far too long discussing answers to those questions. What could he have possibly meant by asking those questions? And why you shouldn't think that one comes before the other, and etc. Trying to give justification to Joe's answers.
We go into depth about them. To be fair, I don't even remember answering them in much depth in the debate because I leave eventually.
Well, this is it. This is all after you've said I'm leaving now.
Yeah,
and you kind of get these last questions. Yeah, and then we talk about Karl Popper, falsification, why it's a not like overly accepted view. Even in the philosophy.
Certainly not. Yeah, most philosophers don't really accept it.
Confirmation theorists nowadays, right? Instead of agreeing with Popper. So whilst I say this in the episode, it's actually really impressive that the guy brings up all this stuff, right? There's the first part of like real kind of interesting discussion, really. Right at the end. We spend a long time this
it's a good
episode.
thing we made a podcast about it. I loved it.
I've loved doing this as well. It's been really fun. It's been really fun.
Yeah, it was good banter.
Really funny. So yeah, enjoy.
You're not doing fuck all that makes any sense for you to even require it to be or consider it to be the idea of science.
All right, well, look, whatever. I have to leave
So
now.
if you take a poop, that's science too.
So science basically follows a philosophical method. You know, if P then Q, if independent variable then dependent variable.
So
if you're not doing this stuff, you're not doing science. Says me, who says all the citations that have been put forth before you.
No,
do you even know the philosophy of science? Do you study Karl Popper or anything like this? You got a master's degree.
I'm a PhD candidate in the philosophy of science.
That's
sorry, you're telling me with your PhD,
So how do you do science?
That you are telling me that with your PhD that I am now smoking a joint and I am varying the temperature. I can let the joint cool and I can fire it and I can change the pressure inside that joint. So I'm doing science.
No, I never said that. I never said that.
Yes,
How do you do science?
I said there is no method to follow. I can't
let him tell us how he does science.
There is no method. You don't have any method.
So PhD candidate, how do you engage in falsification of a proposition?
Exactly.
Are you asking me to just define what that means, or
I'm asking you how you do it.
Falsification, the idea of falsification is that this idea that you can find some kind of observation that contradicts a hypothesis that you've got or theory you've got.
How do you falsify the globe?
Hypothesis, huh?
What, sorry?
You're falsifying a hypothesis, right?
Yeah, you would be falsifying a hypothesis, but falsification as a way of demarcating science is not correct. It's wrong.
Not correct. Damn, you're
According to who?
motherfucker. So you changed all of science?
Basically, I think basically almost all contemporary historians and philosophers of science.
Except for Karl Popper, moron.
Yeah, but no one accepts his views anymore. That's just
no one accepts his views anymore, huh? Okay,
no,
who's that?
Who
doesn't accept his views anymore?
Want to do real science. Probably
That's exactly right.
Want to make shit up like you.
Hey, which comes first, theory or hypothesis? PhD candidate.
Yeah.
Theory or
Okay, so it's all getting heated. It's all getting heated. I mean, it's been heated for a while.
It's been heated for a
while. They start. This guy. I paused it just before he starts trying to quiz me on my philosophy of science knowledge.
Yeah.
So what is it? What do we have to say about this particular piece?
Well, I mean, he introduced the Popper and the falsification stuff. So I guess we could talk about that now.
Yeah. So we can. Yeah. And it will come up a bit.
It'll come up a
bit more later. But so he is basically saying that that you know he basically thinks that Karl Popper is like the king of the philosophy of science.
Well, I mean, he is an influential.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah, he's influential in the philosophy of science, right?
No, he is.
So to be honest, first of all, like, I mean, I was pretty surprised when I first listened to this and his name was brought up, because the idea that, like, it's one thing for people who are interested in like pop science or whatever, and I mean, whether they're like, no matter how incorrect they are about the science, I think people who engage in these kind of flat Earth discussions are interested in pop science, right? Just
in some sense,
right? Like,
it's kind of their own pop science.
Yeah, kind of, right? But this idea of like inquiry and like going out and trying to find out the truth and all this kind of stuff, like they're in some sense interested in that idea, right? They're just like doing it badly or whatever. And so, but the point I'm trying to make is that it's not uncommon for them to bring up like Einstein, like popular names in science. But yeah, it's kind of rare that you'd hear someone bring up popular names in the philosophy of science, right?
Well, I mean, Karl Popper is the one that people refer to. I mean, I remember listening to a debate between some like physics graduates and some flat earthers from years ago at this point, but they brought up Popper as like
who did
the physicists.
physicists.
Yeah, and I think probably the flat earthers agreed with them that basically Popper had the definitive view on what science was. So that
and you were there cringing in the audience.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was through the computer screen. Yeah. But anyway, so look, we're going to get into talking about what Popper's views are and stuff like that. But this guy thinks that Popper has kind of got the definitively correct view about what science is and how science is demarcated from non-science, things like that. He thinks it's absurd that what I'm saying is that people these days don't really agree with what Popper has to say. When I say people, I mean professional historians and philosophers of science, like I said. The idea of falsification that gets brought up, right? Because he asked me, what does falsification mean? Popper's basic idea was that and we'll talk a bit in a minute about why he thought this, that science is demarcated from non-science or pseudoscience by having theories or hypotheses, depending on how you want to look at it, which are falsifiable. And now falsifiability just means that, like I say in the recording, there is some observation you could make which, in a sense, contradicts the hypothesis or theory that you're proposing.
Yeah, the theory is open to there being further evidence that could prove it wrong.
Exactly, yeah.
So if you construct a theory that's unfalsifiable, as in it's not open to that evidence, then it doesn't count as a scientific theory. Yeah. And so any kind of practice that's based around those kind of theories, Popper wants to say isn't science. Or
is even perhaps pseudoscience. Yeah. And an example of an unfalsifiable theory is like, if someone believes that there are like fairies living at the bottom of their garden or something like that, but you start saying things like, well, you can't see them though because they have the power to make themselves invisible, and they leave no trace of their own existence. Things like this. You're kind of you're immunizing your hypothesis, if you like, from being falsified, like having observations made that prove it wrong.
Yeah, because how would you go around showing that there aren't fairies at the bottom of the garden? You go down there and have a look around.
Yeah,
see there aren't any. Yeah, and you go, oh, there aren't any fairies down here, and they haven't left any trace. And then the guy goes, yeah, but they're invisible, right?
Yeah,
they
never would.
Yeah,
exactly.
So any theory that's like based around that is not falsifiable, and according to Popper, then wouldn't be part of science. Right?
Yeah, sure. And philosophers of science these days don't really agree with that as a way of demarcating science.
So one thing that's worth pointing out as well. So I assume that the argumentative move from the person you're debating with, by bringing that up, asking you, well, how do you go about falsifying a proposition, is for you to have admitted in some sense that it's to do with falsifying a hypothesis or a theory, right?
Yeah, because we're still disagreeing over the hypothesis-driven.
Yeah, exactly.
Thing.
Yeah. So they're still not getting on board with your claim that not all science needs to be hypothesis-driven.
Yeah, exactly.
And so then, I mean, it makes sense, like as an argumentative move. It's a pretty impressive argumentative move, to be fair, to turn around and say, well, if science is demarcated by falsifiability, and falsifiability requires hypotheses, then that means that science requires hypotheses. And actually, you're wrong to say that you can have science that's not hypothesis driven.
Yeah, sure.
But then there are a couple of problems. So first of all, it's not just hypotheses that need to be that have this kind of standard of falsifiability, right? Because theories do as well. So and you say that in the discussion, although don't go into too much of like kind of depth of what the difference is. Although you're about to get asked, right? And we'll talk about this in a second. The difference between theories and hypotheses, but then also it's problematic because not everyone actually agrees with Popper, and also like that is a really kind of surface level characterization of Popper's thought, right? Like he's really influential, said a lot of things. The falsifiability stuff is one kind of sound bite of what he said, right?
Yeah,
because,
I mean it's his most influential work, though. To be fair,
no, for sure. But the point is that it when you take it really seriously, it goes against other ways of thinking about science that I assume even the people you're talking about do think about, such as it being like inductively driven.
Oh, sure,
Popper denies many things about science.
Yeah.
As a result of thinking that it's just to do with falsifiability.
Yeah. So I mean,
we can talk about this more in a bit after we've spoken about the other stuff. Yeah.
I mean, the only thing I wanted to say then, is that I mean, so you're right that he's actually making an impressively coherent argument for these guys, right? Yeah. But it's premised on the fact that on the kind of assumption that Popper has the correct account of science, and he doesn't, and we'll talk about why in a bit. But we can continue now.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah.
Hey, which comes first, theory or hypothesis, PhD candidate?
Yeah,
theory or hypothesis?
Neither one comes first. Neither one comes first.
Which one do you do first, induction or deduction?
First.
Neither comes first. Neither of them come first either.
That's hilarious. Do theories describe or models describe?
Both. Both describe.
No, wrong. One describes, one explains. I'll leave it to you to figure out which one is which. You don't know anything about the subject, PhD candidate.
Unless he's making it up. He doesn't know how to describe or do a scientific thing.
I could be making it up.
How do you perform science on balls? I've got 3 balls. How do we do science on them?
I can't even begin to make sense of that question.
How do you do science on balls?
You're going to need to go back to school about 5 times. And then come back and talk to me after you can figure out how to science globe balls.
Testicle science. I don't know.
I don't know, maybe a moon testicle.
I recommend. I really do recommend that you look at that Stanford.
I recommend.
I did look at it. I'm going to respond.
Read all of it. Read all of it.
According to what it just fucking said, according to what you just took out of there, basically what it says is people calling themselves scientists say that the scientific method is not something that can be easily described. So basically, if you call yourself scientist and do something, that's now science, according to what you've said.
And you have no clue of what it is.
That's not the fucking scientific
method. They don't have any fucking clue of science.
Again,
how can you be a scientist if you don't have a fucking clue of what it is?
Yeah, you call yourself a scientist and then you just fucking do something. You bake a cake, you tie your shoe, you do whatever the fuck you want while calling yourself a scientist.
I claim you owe me money.
That science.
You claim.
So here's a funny question.
Money by you.
How do you differentiate pseudoscience from science?
I'm gonna get shouted over. All right, I'm off. See you later, guys. I recommend you do some reading about science.
Goodbye,
pseudoscience. Easy debate for you, dog. You're a PhD student.
In the future,
you must have degrees.
Oh yeah, I've got work to do. That's why I'm leaving. In the future, I recommend sharing sources that don't support your opponent's argument. That's a good idea.
Well, you see, if you read the whole source, you'd see that it was bait. It was bait. It was bait. Oh my god.
He's gone.
It was bait. It was a bait source.
Typical seagull. Shit and fuck off.
Because the source specific, while it says that the scientific method can be debated, it lists in every possible explanation of the scientific method a different way of having a hypothesis. So there's always at least a hypothesis.
All right, I've left at this point.
And that's it.
Yeah, that's the end of the debate. I mean, really, they talk about how much they hate me for a little while, and then
Did they
move on to
actually?
something else.
I've never listened past that.
Well, they just kind of bitch and moan about me and the things that I said. I mean, it's kind of what he was doing, right? But
Yeah,
I've already
yeah,
left at that
yeah,
point.
yeah. Calling you a typical seagull
Shit, fuck off, yeah. But I mean, that is what I did in
and
a way.
falling for all the bait sources.
Yeah, the bait sauce.
Yeah, they
sauce.
lured you in. This is how next level they are with their argumentation, man.
Yeah.
They lured you in with some sources that
They got
had a
me.
crumb of what it is that they knew that it said.
What I believe.
What you believe. But if you actually read it further, actually,
It would just contradict itself and be like, actually, everything we've just said is not true.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
a bait sauce.
And then also at the end, it probably just says, and the Earth.
Yeah. Just like, one sentence.
Yeah.
But
so
so he does say, and it gets lost because I'm kind of taunting them about sending me sources that
Yeah.
confirm what I say. But he says, how do you demarcate science from pseudoscience? That's the Popper falsification thing, right?
Yeah.
He's referring to there. Now, not much gets said except for that guy who's talking about Popper a little bit asks me a bunch of questions that are designed to like quiz my knowledge about the philosophy of science.
yeah. And before we move on to those questions, it might just be, I just wanted to point out as well, a couple of things to take away that's probably really important if it's not come through in our kind of discussion. Because obviously we've been talking a lot about like trying to clarify what you've been saying in the debate. Right, and give more detail and more context around why it is that we're saying
Little bit
what
of
you're saying and
debate
stuff like
analysis,
that. Yeah,
yeah.
kind of. That's kind of the point of
Pretty much what it is.
these
Yeah,
episodes, right? But crucially, it should be pointed out. At no point are you denying that hypotheses don't play a role in science, right? And they seem to be missing that. When you said, "No, look, there is no the scientific method that explicitly defines what science is," right? So science, it goes beyond just coming up with these making an observation and then forming a hypothesis based on the observation and then coming up with
Like
some
that-
variables to
from that
test it,
website that
right?
we looked
Yeah.
at,
And they seem to have heard you say not all science is like this and understood it as no science is like this.
Yeah, it's obviously a completely different claim.
Yeah, exactly. And so by the end, they're just shouting at you being like, oh, so you just think that science is calling yourself a scientist and doing something, right? Baking a cake or whatever it is you want to do. And that's all you think science is.
Yeah.
So I thought it was very important to point out at this stage, first of all, you do agree that hypotheses are an important part of science and scientific practice.
Of course.
And that science is characterized by something other than just calling yourself a scientist and doing things, right? We spoke
Tying your shoes, that doesn't make
We spoke at length about how about your view being the scientific inquiry is continuous with ordinary inquiry, right?
And
but that
vague,
doesn't mean that and we spoke at length about the vagueness around that and how there are going to be borderline cases. But crucially, it doesn't mean that everything is science, right? Or even that the kind of explicit kind of necessary condition is calling yourself a scientist.
Yeah,
because
absolutely
actually,
not. Yeah.
that's not even really that's not necessary, right? Because the point that you were trying to make previously is that someone could probably like be a scientist without calling themselves a scientist. They can do science without calling themselves a scientist.
Yeah.
And at one point in our discussion, we even were questioning whether inquiry needed to be an intentional act, right? So someone could accidentally do science, right?
Yeah.
Which definitely doesn't require them to even really do things on purpose, right? So anyway, I just thought it was like before we go into the rest of this kind of like final episode on this and talk about all the questions, I thought it was really important to clarify because having the effect of having them shouting down the recording, you don't think hypotheses are involved and that's stupid and you just think it's arbitrary and you think that you just call yourself a scientist and tie your shoes and now you're doing science and all this kind of stuff. I thought it like important to just clarify that that's not what you think.
Yeah, you're quite right. You're quite right. It's easy to get lost between what I am actually saying and what they're saying.
Yeah, especially towards the end, right, when you're kind of joking with them as well. Like
stop taking it seriously.
You've stopped being invested for the past like 10 minutes of the discussion.
They're quite right.
And so I just thought it worth pointing that out. And also just point out that it's kind of wild the debate went that way. Like the fact that you tried to point out this not overly complex idea that it's not just following the scientific method and actually there are ways of thinking about science where it's not hypothesis driven and that their own sources seem to suggest that, although as has now been revealed, they were bait sources.
Even
it's
the one about the Human Genome Project, which just literally was like, look, here's an example of really important non-hypothesis driven science, and like it was 2 pages long. That's all it said.
The one thing it said.
Bait. Yeah,
do you know what? It probably had one of those like ChatGPT like white font things, and if you had highlighted it would have said at the end, "This is a bait source, and the Earth is flat."
Yeah, okay.
And that's published in Nature.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's all I wanted to say. But yeah, then the guy hit you with a series of pretty good questions. It's a shame that guy didn't actually say more in your debate, to be honest.
Yeah, he came in at the end, and I'd been there for
right
a while.
end,
So
and also he was getting shouted over by everyone
other people.
else.
Yeah. I mean, they're there all the time in that server, so I could go back if I really wanted to. Yeah, but look,
if this becomes popular, that's it. That's going to be your job,
yeah,
full-time job.
Just keep going back to that. Yeah. But so look, there were a few different questions that were asked. I can't remember the order he asked them in, but I've got some of them written down.
I'm assuming I've written them down in the order he asked.
Have you?
So.
Well, we can go in your order if you want then.
Okay, well, the first one is theory or hypothesis.
What?
Which comes first?
Which comes first? Yeah, so, well, I mean, what the distinction is between a theory and a hypothesis is interesting all on its own. I mean, you might think that a scientific theory is something that's like a kind of a collection of hypotheses altogether. I genuinely don't know what he thinks the correct order is there. I assume what he thinks is it's like, because there is this conception in, I think this is actually what's going on. There is a conception in popular science, not just for flat earthers, but for, you'll see scientists, science communicators make this claim that there's a strict kind of distinction between hypothesis and theory, where a hypothesis is like an idea you propose which may well be tested.
Yeah.
Right? And then once it's really, really well confirmed, it becomes, it kind of graduates to being counted as a theory. Because this is something, for the listener, Jacob's making a face like he's not convinced. But this is something people say.
Gotta love the look of incredulity.
Yeah, incredulity. Yeah. But the theory is like that. It's a theory when it's like fully established, kind of in scientific fact, right?
Okay.
Now, that isn't how the terms hypothesis or theory are used in science,
right?
At all. It's completely wrong.
So that's interesting because I'm not a scientist, as I've said before.
But
right?
you'll definitely know of some examples of...
No, but it's just that doesn't even seem to... So I think you're right that I have heard that kind of claim. But it just seems to me that like they play different roles, so it can't just be the case that a hypothesis is something that's tested over and over and over again and then graduates to becoming a theory.
Yeah.
It just seems that a theory is made up of many different...
hypotheses, maybe,
like more than just one.
I mean, the vibe that I get when I hear someone say hypothesis is that hypothesis is much more specific and particular, and a theory is like a bigger framework or something like that. Loosely speaking, but
no, almost entirely that, right? And the idea is that they serve different roles because the hypothesis is meant to be. And once again, it's worth clarifying this for the listener. I'm not providing a definition right now. I'm not a scientist, so I actually don't know.
I don't think they're well defined.
They're well defined.
Really.
Okay, right, sure.
I mean, philosophers of science do spend time thinking about what theories are. There's a lot of debate about it. We don't need to get necessarily into all of that. I think that or at least not yet. I think there is a really easy way to see that it's true that what I'm saying about the way that the term hypothesis and the way that the term theory is used, even by scientists and in actual scientific practice, is not this thing where a hypothesis is something you propose and then it graduates to being a theory when it's really well tested and generally accepted. Because there are theories that you refer to as theories that have not been confirmed by anything or are known to be wrong. So the theory of Lamarckian evolution. Lamarckian evolution is an alternative to that was proposed once upon a time to like a kind of Darwin's own conception of evolution by natural selection, where roughly speaking, traits are inherited when they were kind of used. So like a giraffe passes on kind of the length of its neck. Like its offspring will have a longer neck because over the course of its lifetime, it spent a lot of time stretching up to try and eat leaves high up on the tree.
Yeah.
And the idea is it's not like a mutation, a natural selection thing. It's if you use a trait a lot, it will become like accentuated in future generations of a species. Now, this is a conception of evolution which, broadly speaking, is rejected.
And it should be worth pointing out that there are going to be instances where that theory is going to agree with the natural selection one, because you might think that something uses a trait often because it's helping with its like
Well,
survival or whatever, right?
but the idea
there are
that's
going to
the
be
mechanism
the
is
point
wrong.
is there's two different things, right? Because something might also be using something a lot and it not contribute to its survival.
Ultimately, it's the genetic mutation and then the natural selection thing that actually makes the giraffe's neck long, right? So, but the point being is that this is a theory of how evolution works. It's called a theory. Everyone calls it a theory. It's wrong. So it can't be that way.
Yeah.
And here's another example.
Yep.
String theory.
Yeah, I knew you were going to hit me with that.
Because string theory is, it's a very kind of popular paradigm for trying to like do quantum gravity stuff these days. But famously, no one really knows if it's correct because there's not really been any experimental tests of it.
Well, I mean, and also a lot of people, at least I've heard people claim this on the internet, who seem to know what they're talking about, would go further than just saying that it's not clear if it's correct. They would say it's clear that it's not correct.
Oh right, well, who says that?
Well, I mean, there was
randos.
Not randos, man. Like that, I watched a video essay about it. But the idea is that when it was first proposed was what like 40 years ago, 50 years ago.
It was proposed for a very different purpose than doing quantum gravity originally.
But also it's there's been no experimental evidence backing it up. And I think the idea is after so much money being thrown at it, after so long, the fact that they've not had a single proposed experiment that's found any evidence for it is usually enough to, like for most theories, that would be enough to be like...
To give up on it,
Yeah,
I mean, the difficulty... Well, I mean, we don't have to get into a whole conversation about string theory.
No, of course,
the difficulty is like, what are the better alternatives to work on, right? So,
for sure. But the idea being is that, like, it's a stronger claim to say that it's not correct, but it is a thing that people...
Yeah, people are very critical of it. It is quite popular in the theoretical physics community still. But anyway, the point is that it's called a theory. Everyone calls it a theory, but it's not been confirmed. So it's not. It can't be the case that in that case the term theory is being used in this way where it's like it was a hypothesis and now it's a theory because it's been confirmed by loads and loads of evidence because it hasn't been confirmed by any evidence yet.
Yeah,
really. So there are even more examples. I mean, so like I mean, the term hypothesis gets used in mathematics. I mean, we don't have to get into what it means, but there's the thing called the continuum hypothesis. That isn't even necessarily the kind of thing that you could test. It's a mathematical statement. Like, similar to how you can't, or at least seemingly, can't test 2 + 2 = 4 because it's a mathematical statement, right? So in that case, hypothesis isn't being used in that way. There's like I could come up with more examples, but there are so many.
Yeah, I mean, so one thing that I guess that I'd ask in kind of response then to that idea of a theory not being something that's confirmed through evidence and stuff like that is how that relates to scientific realism and truth more broadly. So I'm sure you've heard this before. The Big Bang isn't true. Or like because it's just a theory.
Oh, sure, yes.
So people say that as well, right? So that's like a different point than what you're trying to make.
They're making the opposite mistake, basically.
Yeah. So some people think that you have these hypotheses that are unconfirmed.
Yeah.
And then they get confirmed. They graduate to be. I love that terminology of graduate.
Graduating.
They graduate, man. They like at the end of the year, they get all the hypotheses that have been confirmed and give them a diploma. Graduate to being a theory, and now they're true. And then you're saying, no, look, that's not the case because there are loads of theories that we might not even think of as being true, but they're still theories. That opens the door then to that kind of thought where it's like, the Big Bang Theory, people keep saying that that's how the universe started. That's not true. And so it seems to potentially open the door to wild scientific anti-realism where it's like scientific theories aren't, science never gives us truth. Because our theories can never be true.
They're just theories, right? No, I get it. It's interesting that you bring that up because I think that the reason that this meme, I will call it a meme, that's what it is, has become popular in science communication, about this distinction between hypothesis and theory is exactly because that kind of claim about the Big Bang and also about the Big Bang Theory and also about the theory of evolution by natural selection is that you will have at one point and probably still find lots of people on the internet and also maybe in real life claiming that evolution is just a theory, right?
Interestingly, the people that are on the internet are the ones that exist in real life.
They're the same people, but the point is that I think that they developed this account of the distinction between hypotheses and theories in order to combat that view, to say that you don't understand what theories are, though. Theories are actually things that are really, really well confirmed, so saying it's just a theory is missing the point. both parties in this case are wrong. The point is that a theory...
Joe against the world.
Yeah. The point is that theories are just theories, and some of them are well confirmed and some of them aren't, and you just have to pay attention to which one's which.
Yeah.
The Big Bang Theory is confirmed by loads of evidence. Darwinian, the theory of evolution by natural selection, is confirmed by loads of evidence. So it's just kind of besides the point.
But the other evolutionary theory,
Lamarckian evolution, is
like not confirmed.
Kind of disconfirmed, because we now especially now that we know loads of things about genetics and what the actual causal mechanism is for information being passed on.
It's a really good thing some people did that non-hypothesis driven genetic research.
Thank God for that, right?
That fun little project.
Yeah,
it's really
creative,
really
artistic project. Yeah. But anyway, so that was my rant.
So just to make it clear, then, this idea is you think that it's unclear from the context, but you think that the question, what comes first, the theory or hypothesis, was thrown at you to kind of force you into a position to be like, oh well, I guess I have to say that the hypothesis comes first because then it becomes confirmed and then it becomes a theory.
But that's not true.
And somehow that would make you look a bit kind of hypocritical, maybe, because you're like because you want to say that earlier you were saying in the discussion that science isn't just in the business of creating hypotheses and then testing them. It's also in the business of coming up with like theories of laws and more general laws, and you were talking about Einstein and all that kind of stuff. And so if you have that view, then theories seem to be graduating from hypotheses, and you can't get to those theories without having hypotheses first.
Are you trying to think of like why it is that he's asking me this?
Yeah, I'm trying to be really charitable.
I think, to be honest, I don't think any of that's going on because he wasn't in the conversation earlier on. I think he's just, because I've said that I'm a PhD candidate in the philosophy of science, he's just trying to.
Oh, it's like a pop quiz.
He's trying to pop quiz me. Yeah.
I think
that's what's happening.
So, but still, the idea is meant to be that the hypothesis comes before the theory. But you disagree. They're just two different things, and they're both and they're used interchangeably. You'll have hypotheses that are motivated by theories that they're kind of being predicted within. And so in that instance, the theory comes first.
Philosophers do use as well the term theory, but it's in a much more specific way, I think. Which, I mean, often philosophers think of the word theory, like the term theory is just referring to like a collection of propositions.
I was going to say a collection of sentences.
Yeah, it's all sentences or whatever. Which actually is a way of thinking about, in terms of whether scientific theories can be reduced to sets of propositions. That is a less popular view these days than it used to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's the kind of thing that philosophers have in mind. But in actual practice, what we refer to as a theory, it has nothing to do with being confirmed or being true.
So just to make it clear, the idea there being that you think that, so obviously I'm not trying to force you into coming up with a definition, because the idea you're saying that these things aren't well defined, and that's fine. And they're largely guided by practice.
The definitions get really technical as well. Which
is unhelpful for like everyone, including me. But the idea, the kind of explain like I'm five idea being that a hypothesis in this really kind of basic way is going to be a really specific kind of prediction about what's going to happen in a circumstance within a context, and largely often within a theory. It's going to make a certain prediction, and that prediction is going to be backed up by what we think will happen based on a theory that we're operating within.
So you might have a hypothesis about when two kinds of particles collide, what will they produce afterwards, and that's backed up by the standard model of particle physics. Which is confusingly being called a model, even though you could also call it a theory.
We'll get onto that. We'll get onto that. And then whereas a theory is something a bit kind of more broader, I guess. It's kind of like a framework within that you're working within.
This is my very vibes-based understanding of the way the terms are used in actual practice. But anyway, look.
Okay, cool.
Let's make sure we get onto this.
Cool.
Questions.
That's fine. So question: what comes first, theory or hypothesis? Answer: that's a stupid question.
Yeah, what the fuck is up with that?
Neither comes first. Right, next one. What comes first, induction or deduction?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to know what he's even. Again, it's just difficult to pass why he's asking it, what answer he's expecting. But we should.
So Joe, quickly, what is induction?
Yeah, so induction there's a couple of different ways of thinking about what it is, but broadly speaking, it's a kind of probabilistic reasoning. Sometimes that's just how the term induction is used. Inductive reasoning is just like a kind of probabilistic reasoning where you based on evidence, you make probabilistic judgments about what you think is probably going to be the case in the future. And the simplest case of this, and sometimes the term induction is used to refer specifically to this, is you see a pattern in nature, and then you say, I suspect that this pattern will continue forever.
Yeah, you generalize.
Yeah, you generalize. Generalizing from observations, basically. The classic example being, you see lots and lots of white swans, and then you inductively infer all swans are white. You've generalized your kind of the pattern that you've seen of all the swans being white to thinking, well, you've generalized the pattern of, seeing a bunch of white swans into thinking all swans are white. That's all it means.
And whilst that might be like an example that's often used because it's not the case that
it's false.
That all swans are white. So that's like one of the problems of inductive reasoning. It is really, really important to science and how we reason in general, right? So whilst it's false in the instance of all the swans being white, even just the sun rising in the morning, we reason about that happening through inductive reasoning. So we take all of the distinct instances of the sun rising, and then we generalize and say, it's always going to happen, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that's what inductive reasoning is, induction. What's deductive reasoning or deduction?
Yeah, so I mean, deductive reasoning is a much more kind of, you might say, like ironclad force of reasoning. Deductive reasoning is just whenever you kind of think that from a set of premises, some kind of conclusion is like logically entailed by those premises, right? And the idea is that if you're doing it correctly, it's not like probabilistic reasoning. Like, for a fact, if the premises are true, the conclusion must be true. If you've made a good and valid argument, philosophers, logicians work on vast and complex kind of formal, almost mathematical theories of how this kind of reasoning works. But that's the broad distinction, right? Is that
So an example of deductive reasoning rather than inductive reasoning would be if you've got, I don't know, like
Socrates is a man, all men are mortal, therefore Socrates is mortal.
Yeah, something like that. And so you're not generalizing from distinct instances. It's almost the opposite, right? It's like almost the opposite.
Yeah.
Where you
have some general principles that you can deduce things from, and mathematicians are doing kind of deductive reasoning, right? And so the reason that this question is really bizarre is that scientific practice, if we're talking specifically about science, just involves both of them all the time.
Yeah.
You can't pick one out and not the other. So for example, right, like if you're trying to do some kind of probabilistic reasoning where you've got a hypothesis and you want to test if it's correct, or theory, whichever word you want to use, and you want to test if it's correct, you have to deduce. I mean, often this is the way it happens. Deduce what you think the consequences of that theory would be. Right, and then you go out into the world and you see if those consequences are actually true. So that's a kind of deductive reasoning. Often, if you're doing kind of mathematical physics, right, often you're doing deductive reasoning with the equations.
I was going to say just to make it specific in the kind of examples that you're talking about, the consequences that you're deducing are mathematical often.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're made within models that are entirely mathematics.
You've got a model of like how two atoms interact. You write down a differential equation. You deduce like under a certain set of circumstances, what should I measure for the energy of the system or something like that, and then you go out and actually measure it. So that's deductive. The inductive reasoning is then when if you actually confirm, like the observation comes back and you kind of quote unquote confirm the theory or hypothesis, like it passes the test, then you would think that should increase your confidence that the hypothesis is true.
Yeah, and just like in the case of the sun rising, you can then go, this is what happened. This is just what happens.
Yeah, you generalize it. You say maybe you say this is a law of nature now, right? This is what I believe is a law of nature or something like that. So you do both. Like they can't be picked apart.
Well, I'm going to be honest. From your example, it kind of sounded like the deduction comes first.
Well, so so maybe in that sense they do come first, but they kind of happen at the same time. Right?
Yeah, I was
maybe there is a sense in which they do come first.
I mean, I was semi-joking just because the practice in general is, as you were pointing out, is often like science is often in the business of trying to formulate laws and discover laws about like nature and the world and stuff like that. So if you're already going in with that being your goal, then inductive reasoning is already there from the beginning. Because if you were like, right, I'm not allowed to do any inductive reasoning yet until I've had my deduction reasoning. Right? I can't have my dessert until I've had my vegetables. Then you wouldn't be going in with the aim of creating a law, because you need to use deductive reasoning to do that, right? So yeah, so
maybe charity. I think though you're right that charitably there is a sense in which deduction comes first. Maybe because you have to deduce consequences to test the theory. I guess is the point.
I don't know. Like, I mean, this will come into the kind of next question as well a bit.
Yeah, go on.
But I'd be interested as someone who hasn't actually done any kind of like theoretical physics in this way. How exactly do physicists, and it's okay if once again this isn't clearly defined because obviously a lot of it's just practice driven. Where does their confidence that the models represent reality really come from? Because I wonder if any inductive reasoning is going on with that as well. Because really, all you're doing with the deduction is just working out what happens when you solve a differential equation.
Well,
so the idea that differential equation then applies to the world, that's not going to be deductive reasoning.
Well, yeah, exactly. That your differential equation that you've written down, whatever it is. I mean, two atoms bouncing into each other or something like that. You could, write down a differential equation that describes that process. If to become confident that thing actually applies to reality it's just a matter of testing it. Right?
Yeah. So in which case then inductive reasoning is going on even then.
Oh yeah, sure. Well, this is the point, right? Is that you have to inductively support the theory, like your law that you've written down, in order to actually be confident in the first place that the consequences you've deduced are going to be true. So yeah, it does kind of go in a circle in a way.
Sweet. That's what we want to hear. So
we love circles.
What comes first, induction or deduction? Neither. They're both used. It doesn't really make sense to talk about, like, and also like one doesn't follow from the other. They're just distinct ways
Forms
of reasoning.
Yeah,
exactly.
Kind of use both.
And we use both of them, and they're both fine for different reasons, and they both have like drawbacks for different reasons, right? So yeah, cool. Next question: do theories describe or do models describe?
Yeah,
and you hitting back with both.
Yeah, they both describe. I can't really. Again, it's trying to get in his head about thinking what did he have in mind. Now, I mean, the distinction between theory and model is interesting, and we have to get that on the table before we can even think about what this question means, right? Maybe a more helpful way of thinking about it is that, from the practice of physics anyway, which is what I'm kind of obviously familiar with.
Yeah.
You might think of theories, as I was saying a minute ago, as kind of more general principles and frameworks. So you might think that like Newtonian mechanics is a theory, and that Newtonian mechanics is constituted by a bunch of assumptions like Newton's 3 laws of motion.
Yep.
Maybe also extra laws about like Newton's law of universal gravitation, other kinds of, which describes gravitational forces, other kinds of laws describing other kinds of forces. Exactly what's included in Newtonian mechanics depends on
exactly how you're characterizing.
Yeah, because you can add more stuff to it if you want. But then the model is something much more specific, which is it's like a kind of representation of a particular physical system.
Yeah, see that's the like kind of way that I've been familiar with the term model.
Yeah, I think
more
that's
driven by
it's
usually mathematical models, right? Like
normally in physics, yeah.
Physics,
they don't have to be, right? Is the point? So the thing about models, one thing that philosophers of science often say is that models, the main purpose of models, is surrogative reasoning. The idea being that you can reason about actual physical systems through reasoning about your model instead.
Right.
Because the target system is, maybe there's details about the target system you want to kind of ignore, like do some idealizations, right? Imagine the surface is frictionless.
Yeah.
Type shit. When physicists model the solar system, they will sometimes assume that planets are dimensionless particles that have zero size, right? Because you're
points, right?
Because you're imagining the situation very, very zoomed out. You're idealizing away from the details of what the planets look like on their surfaces.
Abstracting away from a lot of kind of superfluous details that you're hoping won't make a difference.
Exactly.
And that allows for this surrogative reasoning.
Exactly, yeah. But there's also sometimes, it doesn't have to be a mathematical model, right? So, I mean, you see sometimes people who work in the military or the Navy or whatever, if they're trying to test out like a boat and how like a ship, given its shape and how, its mass and things like this, how it reacts to like adverse weather conditions. They will have like massive tanks of water that they will use to simulate weather conditions and have tiny little models of their shit, like literal models of their shit. And they're doing surrogative reasoning. They're using this. This is a model, right? This water and this ship. This is literally a model in the sense that they're doing surrogative reasoning about their actual ship and the actual ocean using a smaller version of it.
Shit. So
like,
I mean,
that's a model.
Yeah. So I mean, like I'm familiar with a similar thing for like when you like work on like boats or whatever, you'll often have like training where you have to like first aid training and shit, where you have to like, and it takes place in a pool with like a wave machine or whatever.
Yes, yeah.
So in a way, that's like a model.
Yeah, they're modeling. Whatever it is,
some emergency that you're training for.
No, precisely.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, arguably, I mean, just examples upon examples at this point. But I mean, the military. It's questionable how useful this is when the military actually do it, like whether it even achieves their intended goals. But sometimes they'll do war gaming.
Yeah, I was literally about to bring that up. Yeah. So you've seen that video as well, yeah?
I have. Yeah. The who's it by again?
People Make Games.
Yeah, dude, they're so good. They're so good.
Fantastic channel.
They're so good.
But yeah, I mean, that was pretty fucked up. As someone who likes playing board games and strategy board games that sometimes have a military element. I felt pretty bad about myself.
Yeah, no, I know. It's weird, isn't it? Well, I mean, we shouldn't go into it.
We shouldn't go into
but
too
it's
much
worth
detail.
having a look at that video.
Yes, and the point that Joe was just about to make, which I also wanted to bring up, is that the military fund, or at least I think it was like the British and American military. I can't speak for other.
I'm sure like loads of military.
Yeah, I'm sure it is the case. Fund like board game creators or like war game creators to create war games, which can be used to simulate or model, I guess, real life conflicts. And so how you react in the game is meant to somehow the way you reason about reacting in the game, I guess, is meant to be this kind of surrogative reasoning that you would reason in that same way in an actual conflict. And so the idea is that by getting better at the kind of strategy that you would apply to the war games, you'll be better at applying your strategy to actual warfare. Which clearly is a model as well. Okay, so not just mathematical models, but the point there being is that once again, all of these just like with the kind of hypotheses, all of the models seem to be contained within theories or like against the background of a theory.
Yeah, pretty much. Because I mean, like even the war games, in a sense, I mean, loosely defined, there's theory in the background.
You can think of the theory as like the rules.
Exactly, yes, precisely. Yeah, when you make the rules of the game about how different units, I mean, if everyone's ever played like Warhammer or whatever, how different units interact and how the attacking works, how the movement works, that's kind of you've got like a theory of war going on in the background, right? Yeah. Similarly, it's not really clear that in the water tank case, what the theory is that's going on there. I mean, I guess the theory is just that.
Well, I mean, the hope is that the theory is that like fluid dynamics work in the same way as the water in the pool as it would in the sea.
Yeah, I think that's basically it. Yeah, the scale, the fluid dynamics don't change. The scale doesn't change the fluid dynamics too much. I think you're right about that. And then obviously in the Newtonian mechanics case, when you're modeling like the solar system and you're writing down equations that tell you how the particular planets on solar system orbit around each other or whatever, the theory in the background of that is Newtonian mechanics. His 3 laws of motion, the law of universal gravitation, all that kind of stuff. Right? In physics, it's all very nice and neat, kind of in comparison to these other sort of scientific enterprises.
Yeah.
So it makes for good examples. But yeah.
Well, and also that's where your expertise is, right? Like if you knew more about like chemistry or whatever,
I'd use those examples.
I'm sure you'd be able to use examples about models that are used in chemistry and how they differ from the theories.
No, exactly. So I will use physics examples a lot, although it is a limitation to only use physics examples because there are arguably reasons to think physics is it's kind of unique in a way to other sciences in its mathematical exactness.
Yeah.
Might give you kind of an oversimplified view of science as a whole if you only think about it through physics examples. But you're quite right. So that's why I try and use non-physics examples sometimes.
Yeah. Well, I think we use some.
We use plenty, yeah.
We've used plenty of examples of models and how they're different than theories. So it's now on the table. We know what a theory is, kind of at least vibes-based, and we know what a model is, at least through examples, right? Like knowing what something is through examples is fine, right? Yeah, it's fine. We've got an idea of what they are. So which ones describe, and what does describing mean?
Yeah, well, I can't really figure out in what sense one of them describes and the others don't. You might think that your description of the solar system in Newtonian physics describes our actual solar system. But I mean, does Newton's laws of motion or the law of universal gravitation not describe something just very general about the universe?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean,
so the claim isn't that they describe the same things.
Yeah.
Or why, like specifically the same things. Like if we're trying to say that the models are kind of more specific within the framework of a theory, the theory is going to be describing more general features that also going to be playing a role of describing some of the features that are described by the model, but the model will be describing more specific example of those kind of features.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, the best way to think about describing, I think, basically is just like, I mean, maybe this isn't really adding much, but thinking about when I say, you know, is it successfully describing? Is it like faithfully representing things? Is it delivering you true knowledge about the system that you're trying to represent in your models, right? If it's successfully describing it, in which case, yeah. So theories and models both do it. I think I can't really figure out how why it would be one.
So
I assume what he meant was models describe and theories don't. I have no idea why you would think that. I don't. Why? Why would you think that?
Yeah, I don't know either. Well, I guess unless you think that the theory... So unless we're thinking that the question wasn't which ones describe, and the question was which ones describe... So let's take the Newtonian mechanics stuff and the model of the solar system. Right, let's use that as our example. And what you're trying to say is that both describe, but they potentially describe different things. So there are going to be features about the solar system model that are described by the model. Well, I guess to say it more simply, there are going to be features of the solar system that are described by the model that are only generally described by the theory, right?
Yeah.
Like for actual kind of the specifics.
Yeah,
the theory alone, without the further specificity of the model, doesn't provide the description that the model does, right?
Yeah. Because it's not. I mean, you just say like Newton's first, second, and third laws of motion.
Yeah,
you're describing like general principles about reality, but you're not like saying anything specific about actual physical systems.
Well, yeah, and about the solar system specifically, I guess, right? Other than that, they'll follow these general laws, right? But that's obviously a really, really that's like the police coming up to you and being like, describe this person, you going, they're human, like it's super general, right? They exist in the world, like it's not a very useful description, but still a description should be stated. So if we're being generous, and maybe the point is meant to be that the question wasn't just which ones describe, but which ones describe specific features of a system, right?
Yeah.
Then the question might be, and then because then also I'm kind of feeding into his response to you, which is that one describes and the other explains.
Mm.
And
does he say that?
So you say so he goes. The theories describe or the models describe, and you go, they both describe. What the fuck are you on about? And then obviously, like you're literally like reaching for the end call button at this point. Like you're so close to leaving. This has been 10 minutes after you announced that you were leaving.
Yeah.
And then he goes with impressive arrogance, in my opinion. It was actually amazing.
Yeah.
He goes, no. One describes and the other explains. I'll leave it to you. So you do remember, I'll leave it to you to work out which one.
Homework for the reader.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you managed to work out the first step of the scientific method is make an observation. So there's some homework that you've managed to achieve. Yeah, exactly. They've taught you so much.
I know,
yeah. So leaving you to given what I just said about we're not talking about description broadly, but describing specific physical systems. You might think that the model describes the system and the theory provides the explanation for why it is that it acts in that way.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, I think you're probably right that might map onto what he's talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, here's my view, and I don't really get why you would disagree with it or why one would disagree with it. Descriptions can be explanatory, right? So, so here's an example. Why is it that the black billiard ball has gone into the bottom right pocket, right? When I'm playing pool or billiards or whatever, there is a black billiard ball, right? Because billiards is a different game.
Man, you're asking the wrong fucking
okay,
person.
I'm playing pool, not billiards. I'm playing pool. I always say billiards because it's always what philosophers always say. I'm playing pool.
That's a class thing.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. It is. No, pool's a proper person's game.
Proper man's
game. Proper bloke. Yeah.
Bloke, yeah.
Why is it when I'm playing pool that this 8 ball has just been pocketed in this bottom right hand side pocket?
Sounds like the start of a shit joke, by the way.
One way you might explain that is to explain its causal history, right? So you might say that if I was gonna like write down equations that describe the motion of the balls colliding into each other and stuff like that.
Just to let you know, you're slipping between explain and describe.
Well, that's kind of what I'm saying is that descriptions can explain.
No,
right?
No, okay.
That's what. So okay, this is what I mean, right? So if I want to explain, if someone asks me why is it the case, you've got a why question. Why is it the case that that ball went in that pocket? What you're asking for is an explanation. Yes. I would go about giving that explanation by setting up a mathematical model of like all the different positions of the balls, the different laws dictating their motion, which Newton's laws of motion would be a very, very good approximation of that. It's a classically behaving system. And then I tell you that at an earlier moment in time, the cue ball, the white ball, was moving in this direction, and it smashed into the black ball at this angle. And then, because of the way that the laws of motion work, the black ball bounced off and went into that pocket. Now, what I've done in that case is given you a model, right? I've told you, here's the basic laws that all these things obey, and here's the specific physical setup that was on the table earlier on in the game of pool we're playing. And if you run the model forward in time, then it shows you that, well, inevitably the black ball was going to be potted in the bottom right hand pocket, right? So my point is that this is a case of me using a model to explain.
Okay.
So models are explanatory sometimes.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, but I mean, I'm just kind of pushing back on this because I don't know because I'm not a scientist. And I haven't learned any of this, right? And this is just the kind of pushback that I would give if I was having this discussion with anyone. So I'm going to do it now.
Yeah.
Is the explanatory content of the model that's doing the description coming from the theory that it's a part of?
Well, partly.
So
partly.
given that I was trying to charitably say of that guy that you might think that the models are describing the solar system and the theory that it's a part of is explaining why it is that it works in that way. Is the model importing the explanatory power from the theory?
Well, I mean, look, it depends on what you're interested in a little bit. I mean, there are kind of pragmatic considerations in explanation that get mixed in. So, but if someone asked, why did that ball get pocketed in that pocket just now? And I just said, it's because of Newton's first, second, and third laws of motion. You wouldn't be very satisfied. Really, you wouldn't be satisfied by that. What you want, right? Maybe what you want anyway, is a specific account of what the state of the game was earlier on in the game. So and then you've got a causal explanation of what.
Yeah. So there's a pragmatic reason for thinking that even if, I don't know, in some sort of really substantive, realist way, it is the laws of the world that cause things to be the way that they are, as well as obviously the history of the way things are set up or whatever. That is insufficient as an explanation if someone asks why a ball is pocketed.
I mean, there's many different...
And it requires the description of the events that occurred.
Yeah, leading up to the pocketing of the ball. I think there are different kinds of explanations as part of the issue.
Yeah,
here,
okay,
right?
Cool. Because I was going to say another kind of pushback is that a descriptive sentence you might think can be given as an explanation but don't suffice as an explanation. So if someone said, why is that guy dead, right? And you just give a descriptive sentence and say, I stabbed him, right?
Yes.
In a sense, that explains why he's dead, but not on its own. You might think not on its own, because you also need all the background shit of getting stabbed causes you to bleed out or whatever, or get stabbed in certain areas can cause organ failure, whatever, and that can then lead to people dying.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose part of the issue is that in everyday context, if you say, why is that guy dead, and you go, I stabbed him, you can fill all those details in yourself in your own head. Do you know what I mean? So you don't necessarily have to say all of it.
But I guess the point there is that still what's doing the explanatory force. Is it the description of what happened, or is it all of this other background shit? And that's kind of the point that I'm trying to make about the model.
Yeah.
I'm trying to ask about the model.
I think all of it is doing some explanatory work.
Okay.
That's my view.
Yeah,
and maybe different kinds of explanatory work.
Yeah, I can kind of agree with that. I just wanted to ask as well before we kind of move on. So even if you think that some descriptions can explain, obviously they can still be distinct things. And
what can be distinct things? Sorry,
descriptions and explanations. So you might have some descriptions that aren't explanatory, right?
Yeah.
And so the reason I wanted to ask you about this is because this is slightly off topic, but one of the sort of discussions in philosophy of maths about commitment to the existence of abstract numbers or whatever is the indispensability argument, which I know you're aware of, but for the listener, I guess I should very quickly explain at least the really basic Quine version of it. Quine-Putnam version or whatever, which is that the use of mathematics is indispensable to our best scientific practice. The things that are indispensable to our best scientific practice are confirmed by those scientific theories, our best scientific theories. And so as the use of mathematics is, the things that are used in that mathematics are then confirmed by our best scientific theories. So we are committed to the existence of them,
the idea being you might think that so for example, Newton's laws of motion or whatever, they're used to make really load predictions all the time. They use we use them to get to the moon, things like that. And so they're indispensable to all of that kind of stuff. So we have really good reason to believe that those laws are kind of true.
Yeah.
And the point of this argument is you can say the same thing about the kind of pure quote unquote mathematical propositions.
Yeah.
That the science relies on, right? Like the mathematical physics relies on.
Yeah, exactly. Like you wouldn't be able to make those predictions without the maths. We wouldn't have been able to confirm the things that we now know about the world without the use of the maths and all that kind of stuff. So all of this stuff, it confirms the existence of the mathematics. Now, one response to
sorry, I need another clarifying point. This argument is used to support the view that there are mathematical truths, like objective mathematical truths, and also that there are such things as like mathematical objects.
Yeah.
Like numbers exist.
Yeah. And the reason why that's, you might be thinking, why is that even controversial?
Yeah.
Is because trying to understand what the nature of the mathematical objects are starts making it really controversial. Because when you realize that the number 2 can't just be the ink on a page when you write it down, and you realize that it can't just be the word 2 that's uttered by people when they say it. It has to be something distinct from all of those individual tokens that seem to be talking about the number.
And furthermore, it seems like facts like the number 2 is even are true, like independently of like even if humans didn't exist, it seems like that would be true. Right?
Yeah, because objectively true. Anyway,
I've got you down a rabbit hole.
No, it's fine. I mean, it's worth saying why this is, because obviously to most listeners, like the claim that mathematics statements are true shouldn't be controversial, but it can be controversial, and in philosophy of mathematics, it's quite controversial for them to be like sort of straightforwardly true. That is quite controversial because the idea is that these mathematical objects wouldn't be concrete like a table would be.
Can't bump into the number 2.
Yeah, you can't bump into them, you can't kick them. And instead they're posited as being abstract objects. Right, that all aside, one way of arguing against the indispensability argument is this idea that the use of mathematics in our best scientific theories or our best scientific practice or whatever is just descriptive or representational and does no explanatory work. And it's the explanatory constituents of our theories that get confirmed, that their existence get confirmed because they're explanatorily required by the theory, whereas the mathematics isn't, right? So you might think that, like you were saying about Newton's laws of motion and stuff like that, they're described by these mathematical equations, but the mathematics itself is offering no explanation for why one thing moves when it gets pushed, right? So you would think that the maths is playing a descriptive role there, but not an explanatory. Sorry, I'm saying you, but obviously maybe not you. One would say this. Yeah, many people do say this. And we can explain the use of mathematics away in a sense, right? Because it's just playing this kind of shortcut descriptive role. It's not playing any kind of explanatory role, so we don't need it, right? So it's not, in a sense, it's not indispensable in that way. Although it might be indispensable as a description, right? Like we might not be able to come to know about it without the use of mathematics, right? Right. So what I'm trying to say, and then counter to that, so that's a use of description, a descriptive use of mathematics in our best scientific theory, and then as a result, in like kind of like argument against that challenge. Mathematical Platonists of some description, or people who like the indispensability argument.
Platonists being these people that believe in numbers as like objectively existing abstract objects.
Abstract objects,
yeah. Number 2 is just, in a sense, out there independently of.
Oh, don't say out there, man, because it doesn't exist in
space.
It's
not in a place. Yeah, sure. But yeah.
Anyway, So the people who agree with the indispensability argument then come up with what are called enhanced indispensability arguments, which is this idea that the mathematics that play explanatory roles. And then there's loads of shit about mathematical explanation. So you've got the example of cicadas. So North American cicadas have life cycles of 13 or 17 years. What that means is that they live for a bit and then they kind of die, and their offspring will then arise, like will come to life 13 or 17 years later. And the idea is meant to be that the primeness of 13, the property of primeness that 13 and 17 have, means that it intersects with predator life cycles less frequently than if it had a non-prime life cycle.
Yeah.
And so the idea is meant to be that the primeness of its life cycle has some explanatory role.
Yes.
And then you've got things to do with crossing bridges. You might have heard that one.
I know that example.
The hexagonal makeup of beehives. To do with surface area.
I'm not so. Is the idea that beehives, they're hexagonal because it maximizes the What is it? Go on.
It's something to do with the surface area.
Okay, fuck it, I can't
Anyway,
remember.
the point is that the geometry, the mathematical geometry of the beehives has some explanatory role. And the idea there being that if we were to take away the kind of truth of these mathematical statements that are included in these scientific theories, then we would lose an explanation. Like, if you were like, no, look, 13 and 17 aren't prime because there aren't any, there's no such object as 13 or 17, so it can't have this property of primeness or whatever. Now, all of a sudden, biologists are like, well, I don't fucking know why cicadas have the life cycles that they have or whatever. And similarly with, like, if you take away the topological thing about the bridges, we lose our explanation for why it is that you can't cross. You can't. What is it, Königsberg or whatever?
Yeah, I can't remember. I mean, we haven't described the example, so the cicadas one is the one to look at.
Anyway, I have described that a bit. So I just wondered what you thought about that. So because up till this point, we're playing fairly fast and loose with this kind of equivocation between description and explanation.
Yes,
but clearly there must be a difference if in these. Well, I say clearly there must be. You would think that there might be a difference between descriptive uses of, like, things having a descriptive role in science and things having an explanatory role in science. Because up till now, when I was kind of questioning you and pushing back about, well, maybe the models are describing it and it's any explanatory power it's getting, it's important from the laws of the broader theory. Of the theory that it's a part of. And you're just like, oh no, well, like, it just all has some explanatory role, and then we were talking about the billiard balls and stuff like that.
It can have explanatory.
Yeah. And so I just wondered what you thought about that.
Just my opinion on it. Oh, dude, I don't know, man. It's something that actually in my PhD work I might have to start forming opinions about, like, proper opinions. But so I mean, I know that there was work in the philosophy of mathematics that it's been a while since I've looked at.
Or I should just to make it more like, I'm not necessarily asking specifically about the debate in philosophy of mathematics. Just this idea that the examples that I've given from the philosophy of mathematics and the use of mathematics in science seems to suggest that parts of theories can play purely descriptive roles that are not explanatory. So you might think the maths involved in the equations that describe objects in motion in Newtonian mechanics plays purely a descriptive, like a representational role, and it plays no explanatory role. Just like when you're watching like Crime Watch or whatever, and they do like reconstructions, it's playing a descriptive role. It's not explaining anything that's happened. It doesn't provide an explanation for what happened. It just describes what's happened. I guess it's the idea, right? It's representing something that's happened. It doesn't provide an explanation for it.
Yeah.
If you think that can be the case for numbers and mathematics, then surely other things inside other constituents of our theories, like you might think models, or you might think hypotheses, or whatever, things that play a role in our theories and our scientific practice can play a purely descriptive role and not be explanatory. And I'm only asking you about this because up till now, the listener might think that for our discussion, there's no difference between description and explanatory. Like if a description can play an explanatory role, so that when some system is described, somehow some explanation gets kind of brought in through the description alone.
I kind of find it, I mean, I don't know if I could give you a good reason for thinking of this, but my gut feeling is that basically any description of a system can be I'll use the word system, a physical system, like a collection of objects or stuff happening in the physical world. Any description of a system will be able to explain some features of it, except if the description is as bare bones as it exists. That doesn't necessarily explain anything. But if you're telling me things about how it's arranged, its properties, and where everything is in it, then that does seem like it has some explanatory power. So my instinct is to say I'm happy with the idea that the mathematics can play an explanatory role.
What, even in the Newtonian case?
Maybe I'd have to think about it a bit more precisely. But I mean, the point of the cicada example is just the reason that's talked about in mathematics. The philosophy of mathematics literature is because it gives like a really clear example of, like, in principle, yes, mathematical stuff can give, like, has explanatory power.
Until you come across all the people who argue against it and say actually it doesn't.
Well, no, I know it's controversial
because the real explanation is to do with
the causal stuff.
The years, the causal
so
stuff.
I mean, this is the thing, right? Is that this is another instinct that I had, which is that the people who take the very anti-mathematical explanation stance that no like propositions about pure mathematical things like 13 is a prime number can't explain anything because my gut feeling is that they think that because they think that basically all explanation is causal or adjacent to causal explanation. And I don't really feel I don't think that's necessarily true.
Cool.
There you go.
Yeah, cool.
We did speak about that in a previous episode actually.
Yeah.
Because I mean,
absolutely.
laws of nature don't explain things causally. Like laws don't bump into things and make. Do you know what I mean? Like Newton's laws of motion don't bump into billiard balls to make them move in that way. They just kind of impose constraints on what is physically possible in the world.
Yeah.
And I know that people think about mathematics in a similar way.
Some people do.
Yeah. So maybe not. I don't know. The particular physical cases, I'd have to think about a bit more.
Cool.
Yeah.
Good. Cool. Interesting. So yeah. So
was that a lame answer? Did you want me to give more of an opinion?
It was a fine answer. The problem is that all of this is so up in the air anyway, depending on who you talk to, right? Because there are going to be some people that say that the maths, even in the Newtonian stuff, is doing more than just description. Some people are going to say that in the cicada case, it's not doing an explanatory work, and that's also just a description, right? And there's a lot of just kind of debate that hinges on what it really means to like be playing these kind of roles, and what kind of objects exist and what need to exist in order to play these kind of roles. That I know that you're less interested in, because that's all like super like metaphysics. That's not necessarily like that naturalistic.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a Platonist and we'll take this out of the recording of the thing I'm about to say. I think.
Okay.
Unless
you want to,
unless you want to have it,
it's your thing.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. Well, it's not just mine, but I was going to say, I think if you're a Platonist because of these sorts of indispensability and enhanced indispensability arguments, you do believe in a kind of like naturalistic Platonism because you're a Platonist because it's got a role in science, right?
Yeah, I mean Quine, right?
That's naturalistic Platonism.
He's the big old naturalist.
Yeah. So I'm happy to. I do think that is good naturalistic metaphysics actually, but this is not my area as much. So we should loop back around to the.
We
Popper.
should talk about Popper again.
Yeah. Because we've gone through all of the different questions now, right?
That was all the questions, yeah. So we can recap them. Theory or hypothesis, doesn't make sense to ask which one comes first. Induction or deduction, doesn't make sense to ask which one comes first.
Maybe deduction sort of comes first, but yeah.
Yeah, although once again is going to be influenced by inductive principles, such
Yeah.
as I can come up with a law by
Yeah.
applying this.
And also, by the way,
many times, or a theory or whatever.
What kind of logical principles you use to do your deductions are going to be inferred inductively.
Yeah, almost certainly.
Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of a circle.
Yeah. And then do theories describe or models describe? We kind of got to the bottom of that. Well, did we get to the bottom of any of this?
There's nothing to get to the bottom of.
They both can describe. There we go. Fine.
Yeah, and they both can explain, right?
Yeah, sure.
And so
opinion. So well done. You finished your homework.
Yeah,
He left it to you to work out which, and you did.
I did.
It's both. Trick question.
Yeah.
It's really annoying when teachers set.
It's a bait question.
It's a bait question, just like all the bait sources.
Yeah.
But yeah, Popper. So do you even know about Popper, bro?
I know lots about Popper. I mean, a fair bit. A fair bit. I want to weaken that a little bit. I know enough.
You went in strong there.
I know everything about Popper.
Everything about it.
No, I know
when
enough.
was his birthday?
Yeah.
So we already went over the falsification stuff, right?
Yeah.
So the cornerstone of his theory, like the kind of soundbitey bit that I say everyone's aware of, the people who have some kind of interest in it are aware of, is this idea that theories are scientific theories when they can be falsified. Which means when they're constructed in such a way that they're open to new evidence contradicting them or showing them to be false.
Yes.
Right. Cool.
Well, yeah, so I think that there are some interesting points of tension between like the questions the guy asked me. And so, because he was treating Popper as like the authority on the way science works, in philosophy of science or whatever. And there are interesting tensions between that attitude and then the questions he asked me.
Yeah.
Namely because like one of the reasons that Popper says this thing about science, that it's about falsification, it's about proving theories wrong, right? And this is something you'll hear people say sometimes, is that you never show that a theory is true. You just have theories that you show are wrong and throw in the bin, and then maybe you have a theory that hasn't been shown to be wrong yet. Yeah. The reason he says this kind of thing is because he thinks there are like intractable philosophical problems associated with inductive reasoning. Because if you're the classic way before Popper and after Popper, to think about how science works is that it's a kind of inductive reasoning where you look at evidence, you make generalizations from the kind of evidence that you have into maybe laws or hypotheses and theories and things like that. That you then go out and do experiments or go and observe things and you test them, and then you can either confirm the theory, which means like increase your confidence that the theory is correct, or disconfirm it to decrease it, right? Decrease the confidence. He just thinks that this idea of like confirmation and disconfirmation doesn't really make any sense. He thinks that at least at one point in his life, he does sort of change. He does weaken his views a little bit at various points. But he also thinks that like inductive reasoning, kind of as a whole, like this idea that we can look at things in the world and generalize, like look at patterns in the world and generalize them into universal generalizations, right? Like, oh well, the sun has risen every day that's ever been recorded.
It always will.
So it always will, right?
Yeah.
He thinks that move is just it's unjustified.
Yeah.
Right. And he thinks that and this is a common thing called the problem of induction, right? Initiated kind of by David Hume in a way.
Yep.
Also arguably by like Sextus Empiricus, I think it's his name. A similar, they're slightly different actually arguments they make against inductive reasoning, but the point is that there are well-known philosophical problems with induction, which is like, how do you justify this move from limited data to universal generalizations? It doesn't really seem like there's any really clear way of justifying that move.
It seems like there's no non-circular way. At least the Humean problem
because
of induction.
you could of course,
if you say, why is it that you think that the sun will always rise just because it has done before, and you go, well, because inductive reasoning has always worked, and that in itself is, so inductive reasoning will always work because it always has. That itself is inductive reasoning, so it's justifying itself. It's circular. That's the idea.
Yeah, and also there are interesting extra problems in there because like inductive reasoning doesn't always work.
No, yeah,
often it doesn't work, right?
So
it's sort of, it's even the circular argument like it doesn't work. But anyway, the point is that so he thinks that induction, he tries to give an account of how science works that doesn't involve inductive reasoning or this idea of confirming and disconfirming theories.
Yeah.
So he thinks that there's a kind of really robust logical connection between, you make an observation or do an experiment and you describe what you see. A description is a sentence, right? You describe things with a sentence, I guess. He was writing in a time where it was really quite normal, and it still is sort of normal for philosophers to think of theories and think of everything as sets of sentences. So you describe your observation or experiment with the results of it with a sentence, and you have your theory, which is a bunch of other sentences, right? About I'll use the example again, maybe Newton's laws of motion.
Yep.
Sentences about gravitational forces, things like that. And he thinks there's a really robust logical connection that can stand between the description of the observation and the sentences in the theory, which is that the observation can literally logically contradict the theory, right? That the theory can entail the negation of the result of the experiment. And so what you've done is you've falsified, in that case, your theory. And he thinks that this doesn't really suffer from those kind of circularity problems with inductive reasoning. And so he wants to base all of his thought about how science works on that relationship, rather than on inductive relationships of confirmation or disconfirmation.
Yeah, and once again, it's worth pointing out that that's then what leads to this kind of demarcation between science and non-science, because there are going to be some areas that might call themselves science. Didn't he have like a big problem with like psychoanalysis and things like that?
Yeah, it's actually a really interesting question, just like biographically for him, that the extent to which his gripes were politically motivated.
Yeah.
Because he really hates psychoanalysis, and he thinks that psychoanalysis is unfalsifiable. Like, the theories of Sigmund Freud.
Yeah.
He also really, really hates Marxism.
Yeah.
He thinks that Marxists' attempts at offering a kind of, because Marxists refer to themselves as scientific socialists. The idea is that they give a scientific account of history and the way that capitalism and human society works and stuff like that. And he's saying, no, it's not scientific, because this is what science is.
Yeah.
It's theories that can be falsified, and Marxism cannot be falsified.
Well, yeah, specifically it's after the failure of certain revolutions in history, etc., the Marxists then had to change their kind of interpretation of Marxism, like Marx's work, such that they constructed a way in which it couldn't be falsified, making it non-scientific according to Popper.
Mm-hmm.
But the point is, and the same with psychoanalysis. So the point is, all these areas of kind of discourse in which people are referring to themselves as science or scientists or whatever, they're working within a framework or in a theory in which their kind of set of statements can't be falsified by the evidence. They're immune to falsification, and so not science.
Yes.
Even though the other way of thinking about it, which is, thinking about science, that is, which is inductively sort of generating new knowledge, they are able to do those things. So Popper's trying to say, no, I don't care if there's problems with them inductively generating new knowledge or whatever, or new predictions and confirming these new predictions or whatever. That's not the point. It's not about confirming shit. It's about falsifying shit.
Yeah.
And also it shouldn't be underestimated that it also leads you to this kind of potentially nasty kind of anti-realism where science never confirms anything is true. Yeah. It just says, as of yet, we've yet to find the evidence that this is going to be falsified.
One odd thing that you will see, right, when science communicators kind of argue that this, because you do hear science communicators refer to falsification, falsifiability, and stuff like that. I don't think they necessarily, for one, appreciate the specific meaning of falsifiability. Sometimes I think people are talking about falsifiability and really just what they mean is testability.
Yeah.
Right? And the idea that your theories and hypotheses should be testable in science is like quite a good, that's probably true. Right? That's probably true. You probably should be able to test things in science. But falsification is a different thing, right? Falsification is that very specific logical relationship of like the possibility of contradiction by experiment and observation.
And he means specifically logical contradiction, because our theory is a set of statements or a set of sentences, and our observation is also a sentence, and so there should be some logic
created. You can make a sentence describing the observation.
Exactly. And so as such, there can be a logical connection between the two in that one contradicts the other. Yeah.
But I think that so there's an extent to which I think that people are picking up on Popper and this idea of falsifiability because it gives like a nice, neat little soundbite-y type explanation of what science is. It's like a really nice way to put down a creationist or a flat earther or something like that. I mean, obviously the flat earthers are trying to do that to me, but you know what I mean? It's a nice pithy little weapon to use against someone who is being unscientific in some way.
Yeah, but also can be used back, right? So go on. Say the way that you. So I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Well, so all I was going to say is that I think that it's interesting the anti-realism-y aspect of it, right? This idea that scientific theories are never really shown to be true. They're just not false or they're falsified. Because on the one hand, you'll hear a science communicator or something. I mean, I remember that debate I was talking about earlier that I listened to or watched between the graduate physicists and the flat earthers. The graduate physicists said this thing about falsifiability. They very specifically and explicitly said, no, scientific theories are never shown to be true. They're just shown to be false, or they haven't been shown to be false yet. And then in the next sentence, they'll say the Earth is round.
Yeah.
Which is like a true. They're saying that that's true. To utter that sentence is to say it is true that the Earth is round, right? And at some level, the Earth being round is a scientific theory. They'll say, it's true the Big Bang happened. That's a scientific theory, right? We have a theory of the Big Bang. That's how we know about the Big Bang.
Yeah.
So there's inconsistency abound all over the place with this kind of stuff.
Well,
right?
and also the reason why I said that it can be thrown back the other way is exactly that, because the flat earther could turn around and say to the person who says that the Earth is round or whatever, and they could just say, no, because if you're saying that that's science or whatever, then it just hasn't been falsified yet. So that leaves it open that there will be evidence such that we could discover that the Earth isn't round. And so for a scientist to say it's true that the Earth is round or is a globe, whatever, means that they've created a theory that's unfalsifiable, or they've created a hypothesis that's unfalsifiable or whatever. They've got this statement that there will be no evidence that could prove it wrong. And as such, then that's not science, which I guess is kind of why they brought it up to you.
Yeah,
maybe.
This is it. It's a pithy weapon for either side of the debate.
Yeah.
To like bash someone else over the head with. So now that we've said some stuff about what Popper thought about the nature of science and its demarcation from pseudoscience and stuff like that, I think it's probably worth me saying why it is that contemporary philosophers of science don't really buy into Popper's theory. I was going to say any more. I actually don't really think there was ever a time where there were like swaths of Popperians in the philosophy of science.
I mean, I imagine there'd have been
there are some floating about,
like a sect, right?
Yeah, there are some floating about, even still, I think.
But it was never the kind of
majority opinion, or there was never any kind of Popperian consensus, despite what that guy says. It's like it's ridiculous. You ever read Popper, dude?
I mean that is interesting to me because like as an undergrad, I did Popper, and it was definitely expressed to me as if it was one of those. Does that happen? That probably happens a lot of undergrad, doesn't it? Yeah,
almost certainly. Yeah,
that you get given some fairly influential account that's not necessarily influential because everyone agrees with it,
Yeah.
but because it's like moved the discussion
Yeah,
forward
yeah.
by people being able to be like, well, it's not this.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, that is basically how you become a really influential philosopher. Is you say something like that no one agrees with, but you make quite a convincing case for it. And I guess people at the time thought that Popper's case was convincing enough that it was worth responding to.
And also not that no one agrees with.
No,
Like, some people have to agree with it,
not
man.
literally.
Yeah,
no,
so
not, but
you
very
just
few.
create a debate sort of.
Yeah,
thing.
pretty much.
Anyway,
But
yeah,
anyway,
yeah.
look. So, in general, philosophers of science don't think Popper was right about this. Philosophers of science these days are confirmation theorists still, of some kind or another.
Okay.
And if we recall kind of that's the dichotomy, right? The Popper was responding to the confirmation theorists. He didn't think confirmation theory, this idea that we reason probabilistically about our confidence in theories based on evidence, made any sense, and he just wanted to have this falsification thing.
Okay.
So one of the reasons I'll do the one that I think is less important first. One of the reasons that you might wonder, that you might have questions about for Popper, about his theory is that in the practice of science, not only do we come up with scientific theories and then test them, and then according to Popper, you would say you test them to try and falsify them, but we like apply them to do stuff with them, like technology and engineering projects and stuff like that, medical research, right? And you have to make decisions when you're an engineer or someone working in medicine or whatever about which sorts of scientific theories you're going to use to, like, for the application you have in mind. There's a reason that when you build a bridge, you use Newton's laws of mechanics, like you use Newtonian mechanics, and you don't use some other weird kind of physics. There's a reason that when doctors are thinking about how it is that bacteria kind of respond to antibiotics, because there's this whole thing about whether the bacteria that live in human bodies are going to become immune to antibiotics and stuff like that. Research around that applies the theory of evolution by natural selection. There's a reason they choose that theory and not like Lamarckian evolution or something like that, right? And it's not just because it's not been falsified. It's because there's lots of evidence there's positive evidence to back it up. There's positive reason to think that it's true.
Gone towards confirming it almost.
Yeah, basically, yeah. And then that just really quickly starts looking like confirmation.
Yeah.
Popper tries to explain this by introducing this concept of corroboration.
Okay.
He says that theories are corroborated by the evidence, just not confirmed. I've never really been able to wrap my head around
what the distinction is
between why it is that we should believe that and not be a confirmation theorist and think like, these theories that we apply in science are confirmed, and that's the reason that we apply them, because we think they're true, right?
Yeah, I mean, like a couple of thoughts, I guess. The people you were talking about, talking to in the debate, I have a thought about how they could respond consistently with their position.
Mm-hmm.
But it would be a bad response.
Naturally,
because it's consistent with their position. So because you're basically bringing up things that are outside of science and talking about the application of science to those. So they would then, it would be available for them to kind of say, but that doesn't count as doing science. And so we're no longer talking about what science is in the business of doing. Because once again, like the things you just spoke about, right? Like engineering projects and things like that.
Oh, sure.
They literally said they don't think that's science.
Oh, no.
Right?
I mean, yeah.
Do you see what I'm trying to say though?
No,
right?
I do,
That's a fun project. That
I mean, look,
that's like useful to science, or science is useful for. Like, so anyway, the point is, right?
Yeah, sure.
That's something that they could consistently say, but it's obviously just not like good to say.
Well, I also don't think it's. So the point is that even if we don't want to say that like an engineer that's working on building a bridge or something like that is a scientist, it's still the case that the engineer is going to be making judgments about which theories they think are most likely to be correct or accurate enough to apply to their particular research.
Yeah, of course.
Their particular engineering project. And I guess the idea is just, why is it that the engineer has the power to do that and not a scientist or just a normal person? Like, it just seems like if an engineer, based on that principle of like, we apply theories based on which are the most confirmed, because we think that true theories are going to be reliable for our ends.
Yeah, and the most confirmed theories are going to be true.
Most likely to be true anyway.
That sounded a bit anti-realist of you, Joe.
But the point is, like if they can do that, why? That's just surely that's just the way it works for everyone.
For sure. Then the other thought that I had was the corroboration and confirmation stuff, I wondered whether. Oh, see, here's the thing. I think I agree with you that I'm definitely not clear on the distinction because it's just been revealed to me by you saying it.
Well, I mean, so really quickly, the point is just like corroboration is meant to mean like survivability to testing.
Yeah, surely it just means that it hasn't been false. This test didn't falsify it.
Pretty much.
So it corroborated it. It didn't confirm it. It just didn't falsify it. That's what it means, right?
Yeah.
And not being falsified doesn't mean confirmed,
Yes.
right? And I mean,
according to Popper.
And this is what I was going to say is that I can see why there would be a distinction there for Popper because the whole point is that unfalsifiable theories are always going to be available for corroboration because every test is going to corroborate them, right?
Yeah.
And so he wants to then draw a distinction between corroborating and confirming because he doesn't want to say that those theories are being confirmed.
You mean an unfalsifiable theory is going to be confirmed by all evidence?
No,
not corroborated.
No, I'm saying corroborated, not confirmed. He wants to say that they're not confirmed, right? So the whole point of the falsification stuff is he wants to say you've got some theory like there are fairies at the bottom of the garden. I remember that was a thing that we used at the start of this episode, right? Fairies at the bottom of the garden, right? And you go, okay, I'm going to do some tests to see if there are fairies down there, right? But you bear in mind they're invisible and they don't leave any trace and they're causally inert and all this kind of stuff, right? And so you go down there and you do a test and you go, okay, so I've done some measurements, whatever. Obviously the whole point of this is I can't imagine what a test would be like, right? But it doesn't matter what test you do because of the way that the theory's been set up, none of the tests will falsify the theory of there being fairies at the bottom of the garden, right? Now, if you're a confirmation theorist, you might think, wow, all of these tests are confirming this theory that there are fairies at the bottom of the garden. And we've done thousands at this point. I've done every single test I could possibly imagine, and none of them have falsified that there are fairies at the bottom of the garden. It trends to truth that there are fairies at the bottom of the garden, right? Because it's so fucking confirmed.
Yeah.
And Popper's trying to say, no, it isn't, like for those kind of theories. By drawing a distinction between corroboration and confirmation, he's able to say they're not confirmed even if they're corroborated by the tests. And so that draws a bit of a distinction.
Well, I mean, no. I mean, I get the concepts are different, but I guess the
pushback then is to turn around and say, okay, why is it then that we care more about the at least some of the theories that have more corroboration than we do for theories that don't?
Yeah. Well,
even if neither of them have been falsified.
Yeah. I was wrong. I was wrong to say that I wasn't sure about what the distinction is because you're quite right, which is that I mean, he just thinks that corroboration is not like a truth tracking type thing.
Yes.
The issue arises with cases. So I mean, I can't think of a real life case of this, but I can imagine a case where you've got two scientific theories that might help you with some kind of engineering project. Maybe you're building some kind of epic particle collider and there's some new fundamental physics that you have to use to build it. And you have two theories in front of you, and you have one that has been tested quite a lot and has not been falsified, and one that's not been falsified because it's not been tested, but it is still falsifiable in principle.
Yeah.
He's going to say that the one that's been tested but not falsified is well corroborated.
Yeah.
And I just think that corroboration is a reason to believe the theory.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was trying to say. The pushback then to what I was saying about, oh no, look, the distinction is to do with this, like, and you phrased it really well there that it's not tracking truth or whatever. Right? Or like, the point there is that the guy's gonna use the theory that has been corroborated more because it's been tested more, surely. And it's been tested loads and yet to be falsified.
Yes.
Against the theory that hasn't really been tested and so hasn't been corroborated with as many tests or whatever. And the point there is, wow, that really seems like that's doing the same thing as confirmation.
Yes.
And so I know that was at the heart of what you were saying by you're not really sure what the distinction is, because in practice
it really looks like the same thing.
Yeah. Confirmation and corroboration seem to be doing the same role, which is that if something is more corroborated but still falsifiable, then we have then it's more confirmed.
Yeah, pretty much.
Then we have more reason to think that it's true.
There's also I mean, one of the things that I was trying to get at as well, I suppose, with that example of the building the bridge or whatever it was, is that I mean, and this is something a scientific realist would say. So I don't know, maybe Karl Popper would disagree, but I think that the flat earthers are scientific realists. Even if they don't believe in all the scientific theories, they think there are some scientific theories that do deliver us actual
Yeah,
truth.
yeah.
Right?
Well, I mean, at the very least, it's a different debate, right? Like because
Yeah, it is a different debate.
Because as we said, like a few episodes ago, I think when we spoke about scientific anti-realism, like pseudoscientists aren't anti-realist in that way, right?
Yeah,
like
they really believe their theories deliver them truth. They're just shit.
Or at least some of them do, right? Like the point is it's a different debate.
Yeah,
like you might have an anti-realist or a realist, and they just think the thing being tracked is truth or not or whatever. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, the thing that I was going to say is that there's a question about like, okay, so why is it? So yeah, okay, you can say, you know, corroborated theories are more like the ones we want to rely on to build bridges and stuff like that. Yeah. Why?
Yeah, no,
if it's not, is that just exactly the point you were trying to make?
Yeah. That's the push and the next question that follows. Then, if you're happy to accept this distinction between corroboration and confirmation, is why the fuck do we treat all the corroborated theories as if they're confirmed?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like we treat them as if they do, and the confirmation theorist has a good reason for that. They can go because it's more likely to be true.
Yeah. And if the principles are true, then you can rely on them.
You got it. Yeah. And obviously with a lot of the theories that we often just say are true, it's because they're so fucking confirmed.
Yeah.
And yeah, so yeah, surely, I agree with you. That is basically what I was going to say. I was like, even if you can draw this distinction, right? So Popper can turn around and be like, no, look, it's important to say that not being falsified by a test doesn't automatically mean that it's been confirmed, because an unfalsifiable theory will always not be falsified by a test, right? And so then surely you'd just be saying that those theories are confirmed constantly and all the time, sort of thing. Like, and every the more tests you do, it seems like you're trying to say the more likely it is to be true, even though it's actually not related to the kind of how true the theory is at all. Because in those instances, like the fairies at the bottom of the garden, the point is meant to be that they're not even falsifiable.
Mm-hmm.
But even if you accept that distinction, the follow-up question then that you could just say back is, well, why is it that the bridge builder chooses the one that's more corroborated? And the reason why is because it really seems like it's more confirmed.
Now, here's the other one, right? So, if you remember earlier, we spoke about, Karl Popper doesn't like Marxism, and you mentioned that.
Here we go.
Yeah, well, it's not going to be about. It's not really going to be about Marxism, you mentioned that he didn't like the fact that in response to kind of like revolutionary movements and what you might call the quote unquote failures of revolutionary movements, he didn't like the idea that Marxists changed their theories. I will actually point out, just for the sake of like Marxists were like developing different theories in response to different revolutionary movements way before Popper. So, but anyway, he didn't like that. But here's the unfortunate thing for Popper is that all science is like that. Scientists change their theories in response to like falsifying tests all the time. So when I say falsifying tests, what I mean is like failed tests. The point really is that this strict logical relationship of falsification doesn't really ever exist between observation and the theories that we want to test.
Yeah.
Now, there's a really famous example of this that always gets brought up in kind of like introductions to philosophy of science in talking about Popper, but it is a really instructive one. And the lesson of this example generalizes to like so much science. Once upon a time, in fact, in 1846, or maybe even a little bit before it, 1846 is when the discovery was claimed to have been made.
Okay.
It was noticed, and you got this period is a period where like Newton's laws of motion, Newton laws of motion and gravity and stuff like that was kind of well understood in the Newtonian kind of paradigm, I guess. And we were starting to like build up a really good, robust picture of the structure of the solar system. But it was noticed that Uranus, the orbit of Uranus, was not quite what Newtonian mechanics and gravitation predicted. Right? There were small deviations from the predictions, which would unexpected based on that theory. If you're going to be a really strict Popperian about it, that is a falsifying prediction of Newtonian mechanics, or at least a falsifying prediction of Newton's theory of universal gravitation. There's an extra question. Well, I'll get onto it. It turns out what actually happened was what they were noticing was the gravitational effects of Neptune, a planet they had not yet discovered, acting on Uranus. And they figured this out by you can do some kind of calculations to be like, well, look, if Uranus's orbit deviates from the expected orbit by this amount, we can make predictions about how massive, like, we imagine there's another object a bit further away.
Calculate the gravity that would...
how massive it is and where it needs to be and stuff like that. They made those predictions, and then lo and behold, when they went and looked for that planet, they found it, and they named it Neptune. And that was 1846. Now, the lesson here is there are basically, like, when you make predictions like this, and when you make observations about planets or motion or biology, like all science.
Yeah.
There are a lot
when you make predictions.
Yeah. Based on theories and stuff, right? Not just like a Nostradamus type. just like spit a million predictions out. There are a lot of assumptions and hypotheses that kind of bundle together that you put into making that prediction, right? And the assumptions they originally were bundling together and putting into that prediction were like the laws of motion plus like Newton's laws of motion, like his first, second, and third laws, gravitation, and then some extra assumptions about what they thought the structure of the solar system was
the solar system
moment in time.
that they knew at that time.
Yeah, exactly. And then when you get this, like, and I'm going to call it a disconfirming observation, not a falsifying observation.
Yeah.
When you get this disconfirming observation,
and in this instance, that's Uranus having a different orbital path.
The deviations of Uranus's orbit. You have a choice to make about which one in this, or maybe it's more than one, hypothesis in this bundle of hypotheses is going wrong, right? Now, I can't see how that process of deciding which one you're going to pick on to change and tweak, I can't see how that can work any way other than kind of probabilistically. And then you basically point. I mean, so theorists, like physicists at the time, might have said something like this: well, look, Newton's 3 laws of motion and his law of gravitation, as far as everything we've seen so far, is really bloody well confirmed. But we know that there are these extra assumptions about the structure of the solar system that we're like not quite as sure about.
Yeah.
I mean, they were still discovering like new moons of Jupiter at this point and extra other stuff. So we can say, well, look, these assumptions about the structure of the solar system are not as well confirmed as these other assumptions about laws of motion and laws of gravitation. So guess what? I reckon it's most likely that if we tweak these assumptions, we'll get the right answer in the end. And that's
an instance where that
they're doing
worked out.
They're doing confirmation theory, and it did work out, and it works out a lot. It doesn't always work out, obviously. Sometimes you have to go and fiddle with the more fundamental, well-confirmed assumptions.
But I guess the point
it's all probabilistic reasoning. It's all confirmation theory.
Because the point that you're trying to make there is that, like, eventually you might have to then say, okay, actually no, we're getting so much disconfirming evidence, even after we've changed our assumptions in the other areas, or done some more exploratory work. So say they did, like, use a big telescope in their eyeballs. I don't know how they actually spotted it in that time.
It's telescopes, but
probably that, right? Yeah,
but I don't know.
And there wasn't a planet there, and they're like, oh shit, like. Yeah, we predicted that there was going to be a planet there and there wasn't. Fuck, we now have to come up with something else. And maybe they still wouldn't bail out of Newtonian laws at that point. They would look at other assumptions that are less confirmed.
Or maybe the theory of gravity is wrong.
Yeah.
And by the way, that did eventually happen, right? Like weird deviations in the predictions of the orbit of Mercury, one of the things that led on to the discovery of general relativity, which is like a modification. I mean, to be fair, general relativity kind of also modifies the laws of motion as well. It's a bit of a weird one.
It kind of just changes the paradigm. But the point being is that you change all that other stuff, and then only then you're like, okay, well, this other stuff that we said was really confirmed ain't looking so confirmed anymore.
Yeah.
We might have to go back and change some of that stuff.
Yeah.
Cool. I mean, that sounds entirely plausible.
Yeah. And just the point to really hit home is, like, yes, it's all probabilistic reasoning, and you have to start making judgments about, like you say, which bits are confirmed better than other bits.
Yeah, so all that is to say that it's I can't remember how much this episode we've spoken about the kind of irony, it's not really irony, but kind of irony of the flat earthers you were talking to, bringing up Popper, given that they all seem to be very motivated by this kind of inductive view of science, which Popper disagrees with.
Yeah.
Because like, there's a way of thinking about it. That scientific method that they fucking loved.
Oh yeah, with the 7 stages.
Didn't mention falsifiability, did it?
No, not really. I mean, it mentions testing. I mean, this does go back to the thing that I was saying before, which is that I think that a lot of people who aren't necessarily like super read up or whatever, like when a science communicator uses the word falsifiability, that really what they mean is testability.
Yeah.
And if you think about what the flat earthers are saying in that way, it makes complete sense. But of course, Popper meant something very much more specific.
Exactly
than
that.
testability.
Yeah. And also, once again, I don't know if I mentioned this previously. So if it comes out that I have cut this out, I guess so I'm not just boring the listener with repeating myself. Sure. But there's some irony in the fact that they very clearly wanted to say that hypotheses come first and are not biased. Like there was that whole bit in the middle of this whole discussion where they kept saying that without just following that scientific method, bias will seep in, and that's how we've reached this kind of dogmatic stage of science now, because people only ever scientists nowadays only ever view their observations and make their hypotheses through the lens of accepting things like the fact that the Earth isn't flat and stuff like that, and that's bad because that's their bias seeping in. It's not objective and all this kind of shit. And Popper was 100% on board that all those basic statements are influenced by theory. You can't make those statements without the background of a theory.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that what they might say is good science has a kind of bias in it, but it's like anti-bias, where you have your theory that you are trying to test and you derive your basic statements about observable predictions or whatever. Yeah. But when you're actually doing your testing, your bias is you're trying to prove it wrong. This is something that scientists often say is when a scientist goes out into the world, they try and prove their theories wrong, which is not always what they do. That's just not always what they do. I mean, in the Neptune case, they weren't trying to prove it wrong. They were trying to prove it right. So I think you're correct about that. And also, crucially, you need a bit of both, right? You need a bit of both. Yeah. You can't just be going out and at every corner of a problem arising that you don't really know how to explain yet, throwing out all of the theories that you had. I don't think Popper would have recommended this either, but you can't think about science as just a process of trying to constantly disprove yourself. You do eventually have to just say look, I trust this kind of theoretical foundation that I have.
Let's build a bridge.
Let's build something on top of it.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Sick.
So I mean, that I guess we probably should say that's the official end of the flat earthing type
of
series
of this debate at the very least. I mean,
what is that? Are you setting up that I might have another debate with them and talk about it again?
No, no. I mean, if you want to, I don't know if I want to have this conversation again. It's been kind of cathartic, really, being able to talk about it and get off my chest. But I'm not sure it is off my chest, though, is the problem.
It never will be. It smooths your brain out. I'm pretty if you think about flat Earth too much, it makes your brain smooth.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll definitely talk about philosophy of science on the podcast again, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, but just
flat Earth specifically, I don't know.
Oh yeah, but we also might talk about conspiracies again.
Oh yeah, true.
And,
yeah, I mean,
and maybe less to do with philosophy of science and more to do with just conspiracies and virtue epistemology and what we ought to be believing and how we should think about knowledge and beliefs and things like that, because that's all very interesting. So I'm sure we'll have some episodes on that as well. Yeah, cool. So we should definitely do that. But yeah, that's the end of this debate. That's the end of our discussion about the 30 to 40 minutes that you spoke to those flat earthers. And we spoke to each other for 6 hours about it or something. Yeah. Far too long. But it's pretty cool, and I hope that people found it interesting. I hope that it did shed some new light on how to think about science and the way that these people, the kind of the way that the debate between conspiracy theorists and kind of science communicators has left to the wayside the assumptions that are being made about scientific practice.
Yeah, exactly.
And that it's important to not just be knowledgeable about what scientists say about
their own findings,
but the reasons why we're justified in believing those things is because they're found based on these kind of good scientific principles and this kind of good approach to what scientific practice is.
Yeah, I mean, for the love of God, don't make the same mistakes that the flat earthers are making about what science is, right? That will really, really mislead you.
And then I guess even further, if I really wanted to make this claim, I kind of hope that people also realize that the definitions of natural language terms can be a bit more loose than a lot of kind of internet debate people want to make it out. And that sometimes it's actually a good thing to let the guidance of how we use those words guide us in how we should define them, right? So
I didn't even consider that.
It's important not to take that too far. You don't want to just say that the meaning of a word is just in its use, because then people can't use words wrong.
Yeah,
and that's very obviously not correct. God, I'm being taken back to teaching knowledge and perception now. I had that argument with some students quite frequently. Anyway, yeah, so not taking it too far, right? The meaning of words does go beyond its use in each specific discrete use of the word, but can be guided by how it is commonly used, right? And that's the reason why words can change their meaning over time and all that kind of good stuff.
I hadn't really considered as well, like the idea that this debate that we were watching or listening to, might serve as like a really helpful example of how to have like a fucking terrible conversation, like a really shit conversation. Like do the opposite of. I mean, I tried to be nice to them at the beginning.
Yeah, you
but
did.
even I participated in the shit slinging at the end.
Yeah. You went in with some bad faith.
Yeah, I mean they're fucking idiots. We can cut that out if you think that's too mean. So yeah, it is many purpose.
Yeah. So I mean. Yeah, it's a terrible conversation in the sense that it's a terrible way to engage in
like learning.
Yeah, like I mean, it's a great way to kick off a podcast. Yeah. So if you want to try and kick off a podcasting career,
you could hop into the 24/7.
Yeah, and just have some kind of surface level interesting takes like we did, because nothing that we've said has been significantly
like super groundbreaking.
Yeah. Which I hope has been fine and accessible, which is cool. Awesome. So
that's that.
I think that's that.
Thank you for listening to The World As It Becomes. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, and Blue Sky at PWAIB_podcast. Although for Blue Sky, that's a hyphen rather than an underscore. And you can also email us at theworldasitbecomes@gmail.com. World As It Becomes, all one word.
Thank you.